Fantastic. Welcome to a new edition of the Heat Treat Podcast 2022. Guys, sorry we took a break for a month. I had to take a vacation. But today we have two fantastic guests, all the way from Port Huron. We got Kelly Peters, VP of Operations of ALD, and James Muenzenberger, Senior Vice President of the Americas. Did I say that right, Jim?
You got it, Carlos.
I got it.
Hold off your tongue like native.
So, we got ALD VPs in here, so we're going to talk about LPC, vacuum carburizing. I mean, we have two experts on the subject. It's a booming industry. There's a lot of noise regarding transmissions, process, this and that. So today I'm super eager to talk about LPC with these guys. And just would like to start. Everybody knows ALD, TT. On the heat treat industry, it's a big player out there. For low pressure carburizing. But can you give us a little more, a deeper introduction of the company? You sent me a presentation, and the company is huge on many other areas that people might not know. So, who could give us a good background about what ALD does as a group, and then we can go a little bit on the heat treat division.
Okay, so you want me to start, Kelly?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, well, we're part of a bigger company called AMG Advanced Metallurgical, headquartered in the Netherlands and focused on critical materials. And part of that critical material business is, of course, processing those. So ALD Vacuum Technologies started in the mid-90s, developing the vacuum technology to process these materials. The roots of the company go back to the mid-1800s in Germany with companies we might know very well, Degussa, Labeled, and so on and so forth. But as the company started in the mid-90s, they decided one of the areas they got into for the vacuum technology and the gases was LPC. And how do we heat treat steel parts? And we started our heat treat services in Eastern Germany around the year 2000 with our first factory and the first installation of chambers in Limbach over Frohnau. The second installation was actually in South Carolina, which a couple of years later became the Port Huron facility. And then there was the sister plant to Port Huron in Ramos, Mexico, where we do exclusive LPC automotive parts. And then we're happy to say that last year, we've launched a new facility in Suzhou, China, which is near Shanghai. And it's up and running in the validation stage right now. But we're really excited about entering into that market. So what we do is we're probably close to leadership for vacuum processing, primarily steel parts for automotive driveline components. And I think this facility here in Port Huron is the largest facility, largest installation of module therms in the world. Wouldn't you say, Kelly?
I would agree.
And we have, a great track record here. We have all of our facilities cumulative at 0 field PPM since they opened. Kelly grew up in the world of quality control, so you can take some ownership for that.
Thank you.
Largely in the transmission and driveline world. And so we're out there pushing the envelopes of what we can do for steel heat treat, carburizing, hardening, through hardening, low distortion, high quality, clean parts.
Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction. A very big global company, very devoted to automotive. And why, just my follow-up question, my introductory question is, why do you think LPC was or is still is so successful with transmission components? I mean, why the automotive embraced it that much? I believe on the 90s, and now it's slowly growing. And as well, my follow-up question on that, just thinking about this, it's very automotive, but what as well, what do you envision now with the electrification of cars?
So from my perspective, and I'm coming from a world, I'm not a heat treater. I'm not a career heat treater. I never, and I won't be. I spent 5 years as working in a major tier 1 driveline supplier as a consumer of heat treat. And that's probably why I'm here, is because the advantages that vacuum carburizing offers to the driveline system integrators is the near net finish, the ability to not have to do that expensive hard processing, the cleanliness of the parts, because these transmissions and gearboxes don't like contamination, and it's really noticed by the consumer, the person driving the car, and LPC is a great enabler for those system integrators to achieve the customer requirements that they're looking for.
Yeah, Jim's absolutely correct. I mean, when parts come out, they're clean as can be. There's no sediment left on them. And these parts can go directly into their final assembly without secondary processing done to them. Obsoleting decarburization, is an absolutely amazing thing not to have to worry about. And the distortion control really is the thing that really helps with all of the LPC processing and the high pressure gas quench that we do.
Okay, so back in the 90s, I'm also very familiar with atmosphere, heat treating, and everybody was freaked about LPC was going to take ownership of everything, because what you just said, it's cleaner parts, less distortion, you do get decarbs. IGO was also a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. But I believe there's when those LPC does not make sense to the process or cost, because if you want to treat tool steels like in the head of a hammer, right, for tools which is not automotive, doesn't require that level of quality, oxidation might not be an issue. I mean, and of course, it's not the same to treat BMWs or Mercedes-Benz than to treat a regular, dry shaft. I mean, regular hammer, right? So this is very special technology, but a cost comes associated with it because of the high level of standards and quality control. Do you have an opinion on that?
So, Carlos, you sound like every buyer I talk to in the industry. Because it's a very complicated answer and question that is different in every circumstance.
Yes.
So many companies have a infrastructure in place already from many years ago, and obviously their corporate masters, if you will, want to use those, because nobody can afford to have unused capital on their books. So that's part of the equation. But what happens is, and what we've learned with the early adapters of LPC, and I think most people know that we're very tightly connected with General Motors at the early stages of the product development. So not the process development, but the product development. They start working with us, and it's almost as if the parts are designed for heat treat. And in many cases, we see places with like a helical gear, and it's really cool to watch it. It like unwinds through the process, and when it comes out and is delivered to our customer, it's basically finished complete. And we've had millions of gears processed that go right into the transmission assembly line and aren't touched after it leaves our shop. So it's a total cost question, and the boundaries of the cost of the value chain have to be evaluated properly, as opposed to just looking at the little narrow part called heat treat. And that's where the companies that have embraced LPC have seen distinct advantage for that and continue to utilize us for that.
Yes, and I totally get it. I mean, I have never been called a buyer before in my life.
There's a first time for everything.
I didn't say you were a buyer, Carlos. I said
I enjoy it. No, these are the questions the guys are asking, and you're totally correct, because a lot of people, just say, the cost of heat treat, that's my cost of it. But running a facility, and the pre and post process of it. I mean, if you have distortion, you have to wash the parts, right? You have to rack the parts, right? But as well, I understand that ALD has two divisions: the heat treat, commercial heat treat division, but also eagerly sells model third chambers in the world. In this case, we're talking to you guys, which you run, the commercial heat treat side of it. What's your opinion on outsourcing against running in-house when it comes to massive volumes? As we were talking before to the podcast, you must have, in order to have a state-of-the-art facility like yours. I've been in yours a couple of times, but you have to have staff and metallurgical engineers and guys doing maintenance, and 3 shifts, and logistic services. It's very hard to get that inside of a big company that is fully devoted to doing cards and just a division of heat treats. So because I know also there are some companies that also measure furnaces in order to process them themselves, right? But what's your opinion on that one?
Well, selfishly, Kelly and I both want everyone to buy heat treat services.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're an expert in it. You're an expert in it. And,
that's right.
And takes a big crew to run heat treating, right?
But at the same time, our equipment team needs to be very, very successful, because we use their technology, and they are continuing to evolve and develop that technology, not only the machines, but what people don't always recognize up front. I mean, those of us in the business certainly do, but as may not be obvious, is the controls, the advancement in the controls. And I know, Kelly, you can comment on that better than me. But with their cutting edge technology, and a lot of times, mostly we get that first, if you will. But then there's companies that, if they're in the business of making millions and millions of transmissions a year, for them, it makes sense to have it in-house. It's where the companies that are in between that we work with, we thrive with, provide very high quality machining services, but their core business is not heat treating. They don't want to build the infrastructure with the lab. And I'll let Kelly talk about the controls and then the responsibility one has with certifying heat treat, which scares off companies sometimes.
Sure. I couldn't agree more. It's dependent, as Jim said, on the needs of the company, but selfishly, of course, we would much prefer to provide the service than you to do the heat treat yourself. But it works out really well. We have a good working relationship, as Jim said, to where we can provide feedback on the equipment itself, so that ultimately there's a continuous improvement right on the ground, that the equipment side can get that feedback from us, as well as they provide support to us and upgrades and new technologies that they have going on. The controls of the equipment itself, at one point I was a quality manager here, and I love to say that the least of my concerns was the heat treat equipment. The controls are phenomenal. The system itself identifies any errors that occur automatically. The person itself doesn't actually have to get involved in what goes on with the equipment. No dials, no buttons to turn. Everything is automatic inside. And it is honestly one of the main reasons why this equipment and the heat treat services have been so successful, is because we can truly say that not only is the quality of our heat treatment repeatable and predictable, but we can also have assurance and sleep well at night that we can keep that 0 ppm as a part of our scorecard.
So let's talk a little bit about technology, and you gotta help me out here, guys, because if we summarize heat treating as a whole, you're just heating things up, controlling it into a way, and controlling the cool down, right? You're controlling temperature over time, right? It becomes a little more complex when we actually have gases when we're talking about carburization or nitriding or a heat treat that includes atmosphere and gases to prevent oxidation, carburizing, or carburization. But these furnaces, have been around for a while. I believe that the plant started in the 90s, right? Right now, from the 90s to up to date, everything's about controllers, IoT, Bluetooth. There's not a furnace with Bluetooth, yet, right? It might be, machine learning, advanced manufacturing. Those are the words that we're seeing in other industries, right? And if we as a heat treat community want to go there, I mean, we have to, follow the line. I mean, what are the new technology advantages or technology discoveries or R&D that you're seeing in the industry that your customers are requesting? There was a big hit, a big wave of, Industry 4.0, right, with the controllers. But when you said, I have Industry 4.0 up to date, I mean, that's the benchmark of all the places that do work with the big guys on heat treating, especially with CQI9, and now all the certifications or NADCAP, right? But what do you envision is coming next? Are we gonna hear some, AI or advanced manufacturing or the Internet of Things? Because it's just adding more sensors to the furnaces, just to see that loads are going to be repeatable, as you just mentioned, Kelly. Just besides heating the equipment, maintaining the pressure, the bars, doing the pulses, and cooling down. That's like a common benchmark. And what do you envision as new technologies coming?
So Kelly has heard me say this before, and you'll smile, but many, many years ago, there was a guy in England sitting under an apple tree, and the apple hit him on his head. And Newtonian physics still works. And we're not going to be able to fundamentally change the physics of the metallurgical transformation that's required and we need to do. What we're seeing is that requirements from customers are becoming more challenging with respect to distortion, with respect to cleanliness. And what we're seeing too is part traceability. So an advantage of LPC compared to, say, an atmosphere or belt type processing is the lot sizes are very well contained. And in this area of a heightened sensitivity for products liability and part traceability, we can have it contained within the lot size of that particular load. We're developing technology where we are putting 2D etching on the parts before heat treat, before carburizing, which would give us the ability with the controls to do individual part traceability for products liability, which, they say how many lawyers are graduated in the United States compared to engineers. Rather have more engineers, but the products liability and potential for torts and recalls and things like that is driving the need for more data. So that type of technology is out there becoming more at the front. Second, and we're actually launching that technology in our plant in Mexico right now. And then with distortion, a lot of the E-drive components are coming in with tolerances, dimensional tolerances, in single-digit microns. So how do you really hone in on making distortion as little as possible going through the heat treat? And there's interesting technology that we're developing to help achieve that. We have an idea out there where we would deliver a Class 8 gear tolerance after heat treat. So gear manufacturers, they kind of, really? So we're in discussions with several folks, around that. But there's things that we can do that we won't share here, because come see us. Details about what we can do in the treatment chamber and in the quench to get that kind of tolerance that is really, frankly, at this stage, a surprise and delight for our customers. Not even, they're putting these requirements out, not expecting to get it. And we're saying, well, we have a way.
So a part of the also, and I'm going to talk a little bit about operations. Operating a heat treat plant. Is the equipment itself. That's the process, right? But as well, every time I talk to commercial heat treaters like you guys, we are so dependent on manpower. No matter if we got automated lines like yours or the model term, but on the loading and unloading of parts, we heavily depend on labor that loads and unloads. Takes a forklifts and put it in a truck. But especially on our industry, we have also the challenge that our trace starts to get distorted, right? To parts, to quenching, right? And we cannot apply robotics to the loading and unloading on parts because there are very, very strict tolerances for robotics to implement. What's your take on how to load and unload parts? Because you can have a very automated process on the machine itself, right? Great trade tracking, great distortion, great cards, right? But at the time we're loading and unloading the machine, we still need to have some labor on it. And labor is hard to get, hard to maintain, and hard to train. And if we're talking about going full tech, and a lot of other companies are pushing to robotics on the load area. You as a heat treater, not as a nail commercial heat treater, what's your take on that?
I mean, it's a true statement, especially now that, labor comes with its own challenges each and every single day. We're fortunate in the case of the type of equipment that we utilize every day, because just like you said, an operator loads and an operator unloads. And when we say load, we're speaking of a cart that gets docked up and a button that's pressed. I mean, it's nothing that's terrible by any means. But the industry is moving more toward robotics, and they are moving more toward having robotics be a big part of how heat treat works. And it is definitely going to happen more often in the future. I think that as the developments with the robotics themselves, there's going to be not as many issues with that distortion of the trays that you were mentioning, because we're advancing as a technology, but also, just making sure that you have a good tooling system and good checks and balances, just as a management system, can help mitigate that today. Being able to move those out of there. So our feelings are definitely to advance both with technology and with labor. I don't think you'll ever obsolete having a human be a part of the heat treat industry.
I totally agree with that statement. I totally agree with that statement. Because we want to keep our jobs, right?
Exactly.
At least the manager, right?
But realistically, we're always looking for efficiencies. We're always looking for ways to do something better than we did yesterday, for many different reasons. And I think we can all agree that ergonomics and safety have been a biggest challenge for heat treaters. A lot of picking things up and putting things down, and twisting and bending. So I see that it'll go hand in hand to really help with efficiencies and safety in the future.
And any other technology, because as I was saying, everybody's talking about robotics, AI, IoT, metadata or big data, and you just mentioned something that caught my mind, that you're going to have the ability to trace not by load but by part, right? And this question I always ask, and I'm pretty sure, Kelly, you're the one to answer this question because you work with quality. But there's a lot of data that it's being written on storage load by load, right? Historically, for the time you started to right now, and it's gonna keep being written on your parts, on your process controls, on your ramps, your your pressure, right? And but very seldom operations actually go back and analyze the data, right, in order to get an improvement on process, or an efficiency. And sometimes it has to do because you're just following a recipe that the tier one stated, right? But that can give you a lot of machine learning to see how your furnace is performing. If from day one and the furnace decreased its performance due maintenance or wear out, it took more time to purge a chamber or to heat up the chamber, by let's say 5 minutes from the day one to day 100, right? And then you can calibrate your furnace. Is there a technology, or are you looking into that, into analyzing the data and to a point where you can actually get solutions and see if a furnace is well performing or bad performing, or if you could just say to the customer, hey, we have this historical data with other parts, and if you treat this part this way, right, you're going to get much better results. Do you envision that coming? I just saw it on a show in St. Louis, Missouri last year, but the guys that were doing this were, microscope and lab equipment guys, and I thought it was very interesting for heat treating. But if you were on quality, I believe you're the right person to ask this. But
Well, I'd love to answer. So do I think that's going to happen? Yes. Without speaking too much about advancements and things that are happening on the equipment side, I can easily say that both within the process itself, by studying the actual parts, or by actually studying the equipment, there is data to be had out there that can provide more predictions for outcomes. And it certainly is a part of the future.
Prediction. I believe you just hit the nail with that. I mean, I believe a great added value, it will be if you could predict material behavior or simulate material behavior previous to process, right? If I just stated, if General Motors will give you like, hey, we're designing these parts, and you could actually simulate or predict how they're going to behave based on all the data you have gathered from all the parts with different steel types, right? All the different processes that you have made through your entire existence of ALD, right? We need to have a software or some kind of AI that is able to read every single repeatable thing, because AI is great to do repeatable things, right? And measure them and then just get you an answer. But I do believe it's going there, but my opinion, and it's very personal, is that our industry is very lagging to that, right? And I'm saying as a whole, right? I don't know, you will agree.
I would say we're going to head in that direction. There's always hesitancy when you try something new, right? And Jim knows best, but it's eventually going to go that way. And like we just said about robotics, technology is going to advance, and we either keep up with it and we learn how to utilize it to make our systems as efficient and high quality and safe as possible, or we fall behind.
And especially this is why I'm asking these kind of questions to you guys, because you run a state-of-the-art department, you're a state-of-the-art company, global company. There's a lot of capital on it. You have R&D departments. So if I were to be talking about AI or robotics to a commercial heat treater on the Midwest, family owned, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. But when you're talking electrifications and microns and on your global market and what you do, right? I mean, I believe this is the right question to ask to the type of company you are, right? And it's going to become very guys to come your marketing guys. I don't know if that statement will make sense to you guys.
No, I understand that. I mean, there was a revision that was done to 2750 not too long ago in regards to controllers. And we saw a lot of our peers out there have to make a lot of equipment changes, and update their equipment in order to meet the new specification. And our equipment was already there. So we didn't have to go through those hardships, thankfully. But the same comes true when it comes to talking about any sourcements. The company that ALD Port Huron is today is more advanced than it was in 2006. And we and other companies will grow and will continue to get better with AI and with all of these advancements that are out there.
And Kelly, don't forget, as we're going through our NADCAP certification, that forces us to kind of make a leapfrog in that data that we're collecting and to use it as a management tool.
Yes, 100%, you're correct.
So one of the things for NADCAP, you need a certain body of data over a certain period of time. And we're like, wow, that's really useful. And it's making us better.
Yes, yeah, we're learning a lot more about ourselves. And I think in this industry, I think all of us can agree. There's always something new to learn tomorrow. Once you think you know it all, you learn something else.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Kelly. And like Jim said, I believe that's the right direction to go. Now let's go to a more general subject. Supply chain, COVID. The shortage of semiconductors. You're very automotive guys, right? You deal with General Motors. You mentioned that in the podcast. What are the the things that you're experiencing as a whole? We got COVID, and then we don't have semiconductors, and the supply chain is very, very, very slow. What's changed? What are your main challenges? I mean, we talked a little bit about labor, right? Which I assume everybody is having that challenge. But what has changed for you? And they call it, I believe, the new. I mean, I believe we're seeing the end of the line of the pandemic, but many things are not gonna be the same, right? And not just to talk about COVID and the shortage. Let's leave that behind. How do you envision business is gonna be from now on with everything that have happened and how it's gonna evolve and how it's gonna turn out? And what are your challenges and how you're gonna fight them back?
Stability is a challenge. And,
love it.
Yeah. So, in the investor community, everybody likes to hear things that are stable, predictable, and good news or bad. If it's predicted and forecasted, it's accepted with an appropriate mitigation plan. And with the way the world is now, that stability is a challenge. And you never know tomorrow or what challenge you're going to have tomorrow. So we here in Southeast Michigan are looking at lines of trucks to cross the border to Canada that we didn't look at a week ago. Who would have thought about that? And there's a significant border crossing here in Port Huron to Sarnia, which is getting all the overflow from Detroit Windsor Ambassador Bridge, and it's just slowing things down, and you're seeing impacts at assembly plants. Has nothing to do with COVID. I mean, it does COVID. I meant microprocessors, but it's just something that came out of the blue. Hasn't affected us yet. Will it next week? We don't know. It's totally out of our control and totally unpredictable. When's the next winter storm going to hit Texas and shut down oil refineries, and they can stop making resin to go into seats for cars? It's that unpredictability about what's happening. Certainly makes it exciting for what we do on a day-to-day basis. And we still smile about it.
Oh yeah.
It gives you awake at night, right?
Yeah. And that big storm in Texas last year, it affected the production of natural gas, which, as you know, in Mexico, because you saw this, the price of electricity went up significantly. And you're dealing with that in your factory, and you're going to your management team and saying, wow, my electricity costs are way up from a snowstorm or an ice storm. Every place has something different that's gonna happen. We're looking at what's going on in Eastern Europe right now. because helium, which is a big part of what we do, that's a good part of the helium in the world comes from that part of the world. How's that going to affect helium supply and pricing? We don't know. I mean, we're asking, we're working, it's risk management, 101, but there's a ton of unknowns there.
Actually, that's
So
actually what I was thinking. Risk is going to be going to be a bigger part of business that we've all learned and we're supposed to be applying in the past. But I think risk mitigation and management is going to change.
Mhm.
Stability. I never thought about that one, but everybody is not looking for labor, is not looking for pricing or cost reduction. They just look for stability. I believe you just hit the nail. I mean, if you know that your energy costs are going to stay the same through the year, that your labor is going to stay the same through the year, that your volumes are going to stay through the year, you can plan on it. But if you do not have a forecast, or you do not have something, that something is going to change or can change next week or a month or 2 months, how can you make a plan? So, thanks for sharing that, very deep, very deep.
One of the operating performance metrics for sales department for us is forecast accuracy.
Right.
Which is the core to, sales forecast, which is the core to the budget.
How's that going today?
Oh my God. Plus or minus forever.
Right. Yes, it sounds like customer specifications on temperature, right? Plus minus 1 or 2, right? No.
Yeah.
But
the last 2 years have been
challenging,
for that. But we're learning a lot, looking at other macro influences and making a whole lot more phone calls to a lot more people to try to learn what's going on, and wherever. I mean, Kelly's team has great relationships with all of our customers' logistics teams. We get very good information as things are happening on the shop floor, which helps in the short term for sure.
Thank you so much, guys. Guys, it's been wonderful talking with you about heat treating, of course, technologies. Commercial heat treating, of course, ALD is a very big player in this, worldwide. I wasn't going to say in the States, but no, it's worldwide. It's a global company with a lot of technology. Thank you so much. Learn a lot. Wish you the best. But before we finish the podcast, you two guys are head of a very big company right now with no stability on forecast and a lot of things that you're juggling, right? A very interesting 2 last years. But I believe you should have learned something from this past experience that as well you learned through your entire career that made you a better leader, a better vice president in order to embrace the next challenges. Can you share something a little more personal or professional, right? That will be good to the audience, to the guys that are watching this podcast and have the same challenges that you, but they're not as global as such a big of a company. And I'll give you right now, Jim, the name of heat treater. I'll give you the title right now, right? But from heat treater to heat treater, what will be a personal lesson that you learned that could help another guy with what you dealt for the last 2 years?
So I think one of the skills that we all will gain from, and we all have something to learn, is what I would call active listening. Because if we really listen to what our customers and what the market is telling us, we'll hear the solutions. And I tell the sales team, and this is throughout my career, it's like being a dad. You got 2 eyes and 1 mouth, or 2 ears and 1 mouth. There's a good relationship there. And when we take the time to listen very carefully and understand and put ourselves in the shoes of our customers and our partners and our colleagues, we'll get better for it. We'll find the solutions that we didn't think we could find together, because it's always done as a team, and we'll be better for it. And just think that is so important for anybody in any organization, large or small. Because it'll take you to where the solution is that's necessary, maybe not the solution that you thought before.
Active listening.
Absolutely.
You know, that's why I started the podcast, because I like to talk a lot, but I also find out that the views are because of you guys. They want to hear you. They want to see hear you talk, not me, right?
Yeah.
So I have to do more active listening. I'm gonna follow your advice, Jim. Kelly, anything you would like to share with the audience?
You know, I think throughout my career, it's and we've all heard it before, embrace change. Change is inevitable. Change is not a bad thing. But as you relate that to the past few years and what we've been through and what's been a roller coaster, and not just for Heat Treat, but for everybody, it's to not only that you did learn how to embrace that change and roll through all of those issues that you may have faced, but to be proud of you and the team for where you stand today, and acknowledge and recognize the accomplishments through the tough times. I think we tend to not give ourselves enough credit when times are tough, but it really is the time that you've learned a lot and you've done a lot. So embrace change and give yourself credit for it.
You got it. So we got advice from the very experts, active listening and embrace change, because that's going to happen, and customers would like to talk to you. I'm pretty serious about it. And well, guys, thank you so much for your time. Had a blast, learned a lot, and let's do this again sometime. And I wish you'll get some stability on your forecast in the short future, like everybody else, right? And everybody changed, guys. So just to finish the podcast, we'd like to remind the audience that we will be uploading podcasts. We're LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify. We don't have the video capability. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks with another Heat Treat podcast. Thank you,
Carlos,
guys.
thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.